morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, I'm a little nervous. But there's a reason why I'm nervous because, well, we'll get into it. So, I figured I would start today by telling you how I got here. I actually followed Tom. And Tom doesn't know that he's going to be a part of today's message in this way. He's going to continue to play a role. So about 17 or 18 years ago, I was out in Palm Springs, and I met this gentleman, and his name was Cedric Hardman. And Cedric Hardman was an NFL all-time great who did not make it into the NFL Hall of Fame, although he's worthy of it. But he was inducted into lots of other Hall of Fames. And I met this guy out in Palm Springs, and he told me he lived in Laguna Beach. And we became fast friends, and ultimately became my best friend. And I've been coming to visit him for the past 17 or 18 years, right here on Myrtle. And I would come down Myrtle and make a left and go home and drive past this little building every day. And I'll say, I wonder what they do there. And years go by, and I say, I'm going to go there someday. And 15, 16 years went by. And one day I was in, so my friend Cedric, he got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, about at the same time that happened, me and my wife split. And I was living in LA at the time, and he needed some help, so I came down to Laguna Beach to stay with him temporarily because he was going to kick that cancer, and I was going to move on and keep it going. And I was staying with him here in Laguna Beach, and it was a Sunday morning, and I was headed to Starbucks to get a coffee, and I was sitting on my bike in the back alley behind his house, and this man that I had never seen before came walking out of his house with a cup of coffee in his hand. And that man was Tom. I didn't know who Tom was at the time, but Tom went walking down the street, and I was actually sitting on my bike sending a text, and Tom probably didn't even notice me there because I was kind of behind him. And when I finished sending my text, I rode off on my bike, and I did the same thing. I came down to Myrtle, made a left on Cypress, and I was headed down to Starbucks. And at that time, Tom was walking into the front door of the church service. And I said, wow, you can take coffee in there. So that to after 16 or 17 years, finally come in and find out what you guys do here. So it's all because of Tom that you guys are going to suffer through this message. But then it also plays into our title, which is, I guess I got to turn this on. There we go. What is your spiritual legacy? And I myself am a legacy specialist. And people say, what is a legacy specialist? I started out in my life, I was in the United States Navy, I ran track at Florida State, I worked as a sports agent with NFL athletes after going to law school. And while working with athletes, I realized that there's about 2,000 NFL athletes in any particular year in the United States. So if you say all that I do is work with NFL athletes, that was only 2,000 people I could work with. And I wanted to have a broader platform. And through a lot of unique things with my family, that expanded into estate planning. And developing a greater understanding of estate planning, and having worked with a local sports agent here, which actually got me to California initially, from Newport Beach. His name is Lee Steinberg. And his whole focus, he's actually in the picture here, standing next to Warwick Dunn, holding the jersey. Lee's focus with athletes is that athletes, they garner a great amount of adoration from those in our communities. And that gives them a great platform. And that platform gives them the ability to create positive, emulative behavior. And ultimately, if they do that on a regular basis, they can have a legacy of a positive impact on communities. And that's what he's built his practice on. And Lee has a great story. He lost everything about 10 years ago due to alcoholism and was living in a homeless shelter in Costa Mesa. And his client, Patrick Mahomes, just won the Super Bowl and was the Super Bowl MVP. So in addition, Kansas City, in addition to having a great comeback story, he once again has developed the platform to take athletes and that adulation that athletes receive, and you use that to create positive role models in communities. And that's part of where I come from. So I created this thing, come on, baby. Can you go back for me one, Dara?
Yes, I have something else up and we were switching through that. Sorry.
There we go. So I created this legacy pyramid in 2009, and it came about because, like Dara, I'm a bibliophile. I love books. I read lots and lots and lots of books. And a girlfriend of mine once came in my room and she said, everything in here is about power and success. All the books that I had in my library were about power and success. It was all the self-help literature of the past 2 centuries. And has anybody seen A Beautiful Mind? Yeah. So you know what A Beautiful Mind has all those strings and all those things. And that's kind of like me. So I went to see A Beautiful Mind with a girl one time. And at the end of the movie, she was crying at the end of the movie. And I was like, wow, it wasn't that sad. And she said that was her life because I was a beautiful mind, because I see all these systems when I was talking about all these things. And so what happened to me is I was reading Napoleon Hill's The Law of Success, which was the precursor to a book that you may have heard of called Think and Grow Rich, which was Napoleon Hill's big bestseller. And I was trying to figure out how did that interact and correlate to Coach John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, which is something that is very popular in success literature. And I started to see that there was overlaps in a lot of the things that were in the Law of Success written by Napoleon Hill, and there was the same kind of principles when I looked at things like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, so on and so forth. So when I started a spreadsheet, and I started trying to figure out where do these two things relate, and there was 5 things and then 7 things, and ultimately I came up with 22 principles that lead us to live a full, wholesome, and hearty life that will allow us to develop what we call health, prosperity, and well-being from a multi-generational standpoint. So the reason, can I get back to Curly again, Ms. Dora?
Yes.
The reason that these principles kind of became important to me is because of my own family history. And the reason I'm very nervous about today is in part because of that family history. So up in, I guess that's your far left, is a gentleman named Abram Lee. And Abram Lee was born in Virginia. He was born a slave. When he was 13 years old is when the Emancipation Proclamation was passed. And he had been separated from his family, and he searched for his family, he couldn't find his family, and ultimately made his way to the suburbs of Philadelphia. And that next picture is his last of 13 children. His name is Marshall, and that's my great-great-great-grandfather. That makes Abel my 4th great-grandfather. And the church there that I'm standing in front of was built by Marshall in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. And he was a pastor there for 53 years. He lived to be 103. My parents were married in that church. He was actually alive when I was born, so I was christened by him in that church. And I think it says, the cornerstone here says it was 1927 was the year that he actually built the church. So this whole process and this conversation here, and last year when Lee Marie invited me to give a sermon with her on Easter Sunday, I was thinking of a conversation I had in regards to my relatives at a funeral in Philadelphia some years ago at our family church. It was called Salem Baptist Church in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And they had a new pastor, and her name is Leslie Callahan. And we were having lunch, and I told her, I've always known since a little kid that I should be preaching sermons. And my dad was sitting there, and it came as a great shock to my father, because nothing at that point in my life said that I was a person that has known for his whole time that he should be preaching sermons. But that's what happened, and I'm way off base. this is the funny thing. So they asked me to do this about 8 weeks ago, and they asked me to do it on my birthday, and I was like, yeah, all these things I'm sharing with you got me really excited. And I have had a constant conversation in my mind about how I'm going to have this talk with you for 8 weeks. So there's about 45 versions of this talk. So I'm as excited as you are to see which one is finally going to come into shape. So what is a legacy specialist? So a legacy specialist is someone who has a special set of skills and training, typically in the estate planning and wealth transfer lane. But what I thought was very important about that is we live in this physical world, and this physical world is very concerned with things. And that's really what estate planning is all about. We do a will or a trust, or we do some sort of advanced planning document that deals with our things. But the most priceless things that we have are our stories, our beliefs, our processes. They're intangible. They're the priceless things about who we are not able to be put into a will. And that's where I started to develop a curiosity, and going through all of the success literature, there was the 3 books that really impressed upon me something was Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success, and that's a system that is built on 2 foundational principles, enthusiasm and hard work. So he says that if you have enthusiasm and hard work and do all these other things, success will come about. And then Benjamin Franklin, he has a set of virtues that he tried to practice. And those were very interesting to me because as a lawyer, I became enthralled by the Founding Fathers. And the Founding Fathers, my favorite was Benjamin Franklin. Because he was what they call a polymath. He was an expert of many subjects, and one of the things that he wanted to do was be a virtuous person. He wasn't a very religious person, but he wanted to be a virtuous person. And The Law of Success, which was by Napoleon Hill, it was not a very successful book because originally it was 1,070 pages, and so he had to refine it down to 200-some pages, and that's when it became Think and Grow Rich. And when it was only 200 pages and he changed the title, people were much more enticed by it. It became one of the bestsellers of all time. And so you think about legacy, and I said, let's go to Webster's and see what Webster's has to say about it. So Webster's, the very first definition of Webster's is really what I was talking about. It's a tangible thing. It says that it's a gift by will, especially of money or other personal property. And that's not what I think of when I think of legacy. I don't think of a gift that's will, or it's not a book, it's not a guitar, it's not a piece of property. It's the reason that your grandmother believed so strongly that she was able to make it through the Great Depression. That's the things that are the meaning of legacy to me. And then for this particular conversation, we wanted to think about, well, what's your spiritual legacy? And you hear people all the time saying, well, I'm not spiritual, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. So I wanted to look at both the definition of spiritual and religious. And what it really comes down to is that for spirituality, it's a very personal question. You know, Pam helped us out at the beginning of the service. She said that she looked at the 7 principles, and for her, spirituality most correlated to principle number 3, and I'll just sort of read it again for you. It was acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. But we have to develop our own sense of what spirituality means to us. And hopefully, as we move through our process, we'll understand that the tangible world is very much influenced by our thoughts and our feelings. And so you have to have a vision of where you're trying to go with the end in mind. So if we're going to help one another, like Principle 3 says, and we're going to have acceptance of one another, we have to have a vision of what that looks like. And we have to put that into a plan of action. You know, I like what Oakley always asks people when they come and speak to us, especially on the fourth Sunday of the month. He's like, what's the call to action? He wants to know, what's the call to action? And so when we're talking about our spiritual legacy, we have to say, what's our call to action? And in your thing, I have some notes, and the first one is a V, and that V stands for vision, right? You have to have a vision of where you're trying to go with your own life. We spend an immense amount of time thinking about what we're going to do when we go to Jamaica, what restaurants we're going to go to, what beaches we're going to go to, what events we're going to get involved in for vacation. We have a very detailed plan for our vacation. So my challenge to you is to think about it from a personal context. You know, what is it that you want your legacy to be? Once you've thought about the question of spirituality, what do you want your personal spiritual legacy to be? And when people ask me, well, what is this legacy planning? It's ultimately, your life is a combination of everything that you do, and the reflections that people will have of you is the sum total of that. So this is not the best analogy, but I like to think of it like a wall, right? And every day in your life is a brick that you're applying to that wall. So ultimately, your legacy is what you do every day. And now we're back to Tom. So part of Tom's legacy is, in a religious way, Tom comes to this congregation, to this fellowship every Sunday, and because of his commitment to that, what he does every day, that's what I witnessed. He didn't know that I was witnessing it the way that I witnessed it, but I saw Tom, and I followed Tom, quite literally, into this congregation. And on that day, I met Barbara Williams Pemberton, and I met Jean Roan, and I met Jean and Jack, and they were so welcoming, and I met a lot of other people that day, but those people all stood out to me, and they invited me in. And what they do every day or every week is they have a get-together up on top of the world on Thursday, and they said on Thursday morning you have to come over and get together with us on top of the world. And so they're developing a muscle, and that muscle is a muscle of acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth, and they invited me into those activities. And by inviting me into those activities, I became interested in what was going on here. And because of all of the wonderful people that I met here, I developed a strong commitment to the things that I saw that were going on here. The principles of Unitarian Universalism, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is something that's very near and dear and special to me, because if you haven't noticed, I'm a black man. And living as a black man in America creates a special opportunity to develop understanding for the meaning of equality, for the meaning of acceptance, and there's lots of opportunities to see people say these words while at the same time espousing multiple sentences to discredit and disqualify the same thoughts. So the first time I followed Tom in, and I was encouraged, as we all are every week, to look at the sign and to read the back of the program. I did that, and I started to develop a vision, right? So we're back to our notes, vision. And I started to develop a belief in what was going on here, and that that's something that I wanted to be a part of and that I wanted to contribute to. And believe it or not, I put together a plan. And I said, I'm going to have a plan because my father always told me and my 4 brothers and sisters that you plan your work and you work your plan. And that's what you do. You plan your work and you work out your plan. And my plan was to get to know as many people in this congregation and to get to develop a relationship one-on-one with as many people as I could in this congregation. And I see my friends came in late, and Bill, I still owe you a text back, but I've worked very hard in that plan to try to develop one-on-one connections and to be of service. And I didn't put the last slide in for the pyramid, but the foundation of the legacy pyramid is about humility and service. And if you do everything,
I'm
I
going
got
back.
insistent. If you do everything from a perspective of humility and service, if you paid attention to the readings today, they echo humility multiple times throughout the readings. And the point with humility and service is that the tangible reality that we live in is very tricky. And the more you go along a path and become adept at something, the more you can be tricked into thinking that you're special or better than or more ordained by God or the Creator to behave in ways that are not ones of, let's just call it goodness and grace. And when you embrace a spirit of humility, and you do that in a manner of service, and a heart of service, everything that you do takes on a whole different vein and a whole different discourse. So, everything just went blank on the whole screen. So I'll bring it back to you just have to have a plan, and you have to have a vision. And my challenge for you today is to think about yourself personally. First, I want you to say, what is it that is my belief of what spirituality is? It's a reaching question, and when you figure out how you personally believe about spirituality, I want you to see how you would like to be remembered. So last week I was speaking with Reverend Tom before the service, and we were talking about legacy and generativity, and he said that he does a remembrance class, How I'm Going to Be Remembered, I think is what he called it, and it may have a different title. But one of the things that they do in that class is that he has everyone plan the memorial service. And in planning the memorial service and all of the details, it gives them an ability to kind of think about things that are important to them, but it also has a chance to think about some things that you might want to reposition or re-clarify in terms of priorities. Is it a really important priority for you to make sure that you get an extra 40 hours in at the office? Or is it a priority to make sure you get an extra amount of time in with the grandkids or the great-grandkids, sharing with them about the things that you believe most and the things that you got from your grandmother that you thought were the pearls that made it possible for you to get through your life's journey. And when you think about that, about yourself personally, and I want you to start thinking about us as a community and this fellowship, and I challenge you to say, who is it that we are as a spiritual community, and what is it that we do as a spiritual community? One of the things that we did today is we committed to starting this effort to show through our action, as I say, UUFLB in action, putting our beliefs in action. And I challenge you to be vocal with the rest of us in the fellowship once you have some clarity on what that is, and so that we can have a legacy plan as an organization, because legacy is an individual thing, it's a family thing, it's a community thing, and because we're a fellowship, we are a community, and if we have a vision of who we want to be remembered as an individual, then we can start to work to affect that as a community, and there's power in numbers. So I just invite you to think about that. And hopefully, this rambling talk, my first sermon ever, provided something in there that was a pearl of wisdom that'll at least make you curious to come and find me, because I'm always around, and continue the conversation about what legacy is and how it relates to me and my work personally, how it relates to you and your lives personally, and then how it relates to us as a community and how we move forward. Our closing thoughts today come from some people call him a Sufi poet, some people call him a Persian poet, some people today might call him an Iranian poet, but Rumi was a great philosopher, and he said, when you feel a peaceful joy, that's when you are near truth. With that, I invite everyone who is able to stand and join hands, and Carol will play our closing song for us.